Hey, what is up, everyone? This is Gary A. Swaby, and you are now listening to the Swift Report. Today I'm going to be asking about, God of War Ragnarok because this is a game that recently came out. And, I don't yet have a PS5, but I am very curious about this game. So I had to bring in an expert, someone who reviewed the game, who got to play it, ahead of time and everything, and that is Mr. Richard Bailey Jr. How are you doing, Richard?
Doing good, Gary. What's up, listeners and viewers?
What's up, indeed? And yeah, just like seeing your dedication to this review, it gave me that feel of that I used to have, with the coalition. When we would always get these games so early, myself included, and we would like be heads down, just focusing hard on playing the game, trying to beat it before the embargo ends, and just making loads of notes and doing research. It's a big job to actually review a game, ahead of time. And for those who don't know, there are the people who review the game after it comes out, and then there's the people who review it before, who get early access to it. And that is a hard job in itself because you don't have a lot of reference material, if you're
Mm-hmm.
reviewing a game before it comes out. You only have your own judgment to go off of, and because you are embargoed, you can't really talk about it to a lot of people. So you have to really trust yourself and your ability to review a game and think critically about it. So people think that it's an easy job to review games or tech or hardware or whatever it is, but it's really not. Like a lot, it's a very important discipline. Like you have to summon a lot of discipline within yourself to really be able to do that. And that's something that I want more people to appreciate, when it comes to these reviews, because there are times when I reviewed a game and I might have been very impressed with it. I'd still be honest and write down the critiques and everything. But then when the embargo ends and all of the reviews come out from all of the sites, I'm like one of the only reviewers that reviewed it positively or something like that, and then
Mm-hmm.
that makes you look a certain way because people are like, oh, he just likes every game, or he's being biased. So
Yep.
it's not an easy job. I want people to understand that. So a lot of praise, a lot of credit goes to Richard Bailey Jr. for what he did with this review. And
Well,
and can Oh yeah, go ahead.
oh no. Well, before you answer that question, I want to
Yeah.
say thank you. Obviously, I also give praise to you as well. Everybody on the coalition that even that writes reviews. We still have Adam Vale. Uh, you know, his brother, as well as Danny Martinez and Joe LaRue. Everybody on the staff that has been writing the reviews for gaming, I give them a salute. I also want to take a moment out to also honor Dana Abercrombie because she writes a lot of content on the website as well. I just want to emphasize to people writing. A lot of people might think it's easy to do, but when you have to actually look at something, play it meticulously, it takes a lot of time because you want to try to make sure your grammar is on point, people understand what you're saying. So yes, for anyone out there that writes about games or writes about movies or whatever, I give them a lot of credit for that because it's a time consuming job, and it just so happens that the other job that I have, my other work job, also has to do with writing content. So it takes a lot of time, but it's a lot of fun to check out the games. So I did want to start off by saying that, and I also will add another point in here about what you said, Gary, about what some people may read a review. I recall a situation we had a while ago. Our very good friend, Mr. H Town, Eddie V. He reviewed a game that a lot of people tried to say was horrible, which is DMC Devil May Cry. I recall he gave this game a 9 out of 10. And I saw we got a whole bunch of comments, people talking trash about what did these guys did they get paid to write this review? And then I look at the reviews overall. IGN gave it a 9 out of 10. A lot of websites gave it a high score. So I didn't want to make that point right off the bat, because when I reviewed this game, I did give it 5 stars, because I know we have a star system. But I also noticed, and again, because I was right on the embargo, because again, I did get access to the game early. The review embargo ended last week. So I was on time with the embargo, and I put my score out there because I was very impressed. We'll get into all of that stuff. But I noticed IGN gave it a 10. A lot of the reputable websites gave it high scores, but also the content creators that got access to the game early, they also gave it a high score. So that's what I'm saying, because I know when sometimes people will read a review or they'll see a review, they'll think, oh, this is all BS. And obviously these people are lying about what they're saying. But I've seen some people making comments having played the first few hours of this game, and they're like, man, the reviewers were on point because the game is really good. And that's what I'm saying. You know, people should stop looking at the scores and really try to appreciate what is being said in the review, because it's not really necessarily always about the score. Every game is not perfect, but there are certain things about a game that you will basically get from whether you're watching a review or you're reading a review. There are certain things about that will be said about the game that are positive and negative. But again, at the end of the day, you know, if you're a fan of a franchise, or you have an interest in a game, you should be the one to play it for yourself and see how you feel about it. But the fact that this game got overwhelmingly positive reviews across the board, that speaks for itself. Because I know that Sony Santa Monica studio put a lot of time into this game. They've been through quite a bit of drama as far as people having threats because they weren't vocal about certain things about when the game was going to come out and stuff like that. So that's why I said, any studio that puts time into their actual game and it turns out great, they deserve praise for sure. So, but yeah, I just wanted to make mentions about that real quick with the review. But yeah, feel free to ask the question you were about to ask before I interrupted.
Oh yeah, and thank you for highlighting all of that, because that it's important that the people know that, you know. And you know, there were with this game in particular, there were 2 reviews that I read, you know, and that was your review, of course, and of course Tony Polanco. You know, those were the only 2 reviews I read. Both excellent reviews. Those are 2 people I trust to keep it, you know, all the way 100 about, you know, any game that they review and stuff. So I definitely recommend, you know, reading those 2 reviews. So, you know, with that being said, like, you know, the question I was going to ask was, you know, how was, before we actually get into the game itself, like, how was the process of reviewing this game for you? Like, was there anything that stuck out in your mind? Was there anything that was particularly challenging with, you know, putting together your review? I guess you already kind of touched on some things, but, you know, how was that process for you?
Well, I think the process that I had coming into this game is that, you know, I did play God of War 2018, but I played it only recently because I knew it would be a good idea to get caught up on that game so that I understand everything that's happening in the sequel. Prior to that, I have a lot of history with the God of War series. God of War 3 is probably still one of my most favorite games in the entire series. However, this is going to be on that list as well for a lot of other reasons. But I think coming into the game, I was wondering, you know, obviously I was comfortable reviewing the game or pretty much any game. You know, earlier this year, I did review Horizon Forbidden West. And again, that was another game where I went in and played the first one to try to get a feel for the story and what the direction was going to be going into the sequel. So with this game, I think you wonder because, again, I want to make it very clear to everybody, I'm not a massive fan of God of War. I love God of War 3. That was an awesome, fantastic game. I really enjoy the series, but I wouldn't say that I'm the most expert of fans in the actual series. I give that honor to our very good friend, Tony Polanco. He is the expert as far as when it comes to Kratos and God of War. But I think coming into this game, the challenge I was wondering is, you know, pretty much how in depth I was going to need to be on certain aspects of it. Because my thought is that everybody played God of War 2018, so they should already have an understanding of how the game is in certain aspects. And for the most part, a lot of things in this game are similar in some degrees, but there's also refinements and other things they put into it that make it a much better, more immersive experience. So I think coming into it, you obviously have a thought as to, well, if you're not necessarily an expert, are you going to be able to fully articulate and say what it is that you feel you got out of the game? And I think I did a decent job. I'm not going to say that I'm the best at this. Again, there are others that are experts. They really study all aspects of the series and the lore. So I give full credit to those individuals. But coming into it, I was wondering if I was going to be convincing. But a point I will make is, even again, like I said, I'm not a diehard fan of the series, but the fact that I came into this game and even I was impressed coming out of it, I think, again, that speaks volumes to how fantastic the game actually is. Because even if you're not a diehard fan, you want to go into this game, you want to see how it is. And there are some other things I will say later on that we'll get into. But all I will say for now is, that was the only challenge I had. I didn't really think it was going to be an issue writing it because I knew what I wanted to say. And one thing that you do, get a feel for doing as you're writing reviews, as you're playing a game, because I had about at least 2 weeks to play this game. You'll have certain points where you'll start playing the game and you just want to immerse yourself in the experience. Then later on, something will come to mind that I want to say, and I'll just make a note of what it is that I want to say. I keep a whole bunch of notes. Then I go back, and then as I'm writing the review, I revisit those notes, and maybe I refine some stuff that I was going to say, so on and so forth. But that's pretty much the process that I have been doing as far as reviews are concerned. But outside of just wondering how much I can nail as far as sounding as though I understood the world and the characters, that's the only thing I was making sure that I was on point with, because I felt everyone knew what to expect from 2018, and they know this is a continuation of that story. So,
oh yeah, and that is a very important writer tactic there, because there are times when those thoughts and those lines just come into your mind, and then it goes away as quick as it comes. So you have to write it down right there and then. So
exactly.
You gotta keep that notepad next to you. But and like you said before, about not knowing if you was going to be able to convey all of the information convincingly, because you don't have like the depth of knowledge as like other people who have studied the game and the history of the game and stuff. I've felt exactly like that before when reviewing games. Like if I didn't review like a previous version of the game or something, it can be very challenging to do that. So that's why you deserve even more credit for the job you did, in this review, because it seemed like, all of your gaps in knowledge were filled. Like you went out of your way to do that research, and, you definitely did a solid job with the review. But so let's get into the game itself and some of your thoughts, on the game and why it's so great and everything like that. So first of all, before we get into, the gameplay and story elements and stuff, one of the most, I guess, significant dialogues about this game going around that I remember was the fact that it was still kind of a cross-gen game. So, this game is coming out simultaneously on the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. And, we're about 2 years into the existence of the PlayStation 5 now. And I know people, they want to see that full next gen, experience. Like they want to see it, what a game looks like just developed for the PlayStation 5. So that seemed to be a point of discussion that I saw a lot on Twitter and other platforms, that, people like they wanted this game to be purely next gen. Because of course, if you're developing a game for previous gen and next gen, you do have to make some compromises to make sure there is some parity between the two systems. You know, even if they do enhance the textures and things of that nature on the PS5 version, there's still going to be some compromises of, you know, how far they can push the limits of, you know, the game from a technical aspect. So I want to ask you, like, do you think this was something that mattered at all? And did it, you know, cripple the game in any way or stifle the quality of the game, in your opinion? So let us know your thoughts.
Well, first and foremost, let me say that I personally do hope that in the future, you know, PlayStation focuses solely on PlayStation 5. Obviously, a lot of their first party titles are going to be coming to PC now as well. So that's that's something that they're going to do, like, where there'll be like a year gap in between the PC release and the PlayStation console release, which is fine. But to answer the question specifically about this game, there are certain things that as you're playing the game, there are certain aspects where okay, this is obviously still made for PS4, because the loading screens are hidden behind other things that you're doing in the game. Like, it could be something whereas you're going from one mystic gateway to another, and they have the dialogue because the dialogue is meant to keep you engaged in the story, but really that's loading for you to get into the next world that you have to travel to. Also, they have instances where you're climbing, or you have to crawl into certain areas, and that, again, I feel like that is put there to give you the illusion. It really is to progress, because you have to go through certain obstacles in the game. But that stuff, you could tell clearly that's a loading screen behind that. So I kind of feel like, and then of course when you die, it does take a quick little second before you're able to come back. Not entirely long. It's pretty fast actually on PS5. But one thing I will say about PS4, because I didn't get a chance to play the game on PS4. I mean, I have a PS5. When the PS5 came out, that was what I focused on. I don't have a PS4 anymore because I feel like the PS5 stuff is backwards compatible anyway on PS5, so I don't need the PS4. But what I have heard is that the PS4, people who have a PS4, they play this game. Every time they load up the game, it sounds like it's a jet engine, because of all the stuff that's happening in the game, loud, very loud, that you can hear all these loud sounds and stuff with the system, depending on what model you have, I'm assuming. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a PS4 title. It, however, looks fantastic. It looks fantastic. And, again, I've seen some videos of the game on PS4, and then I see the stuff on PS5. It still looks great on both systems. Obviously, with PS5, you have the resolution settings and all this other stuff, which really, can enhance things a little bit further from a performance standpoint. But for the most part, the game looks fantastic. So, I mean, I don't really have any issues with them making the decision to release it on PS4. Do I think they should have made this only on PS5? Yes, because I feel like you need to give somebody a reason. For those that actually are able to have a PS5 now, you need to give them a reason why they purchased that system and why they should get the system. With that said, you can get this game on PS4, but I wouldn't know to what extent, what other shortcomings it has on PS4 compared to PS5. It still looks the same and it plays great. But with the PS5, the resolution settings, you of course have the DualSense controller, which, again, it makes every game a lot more immersive because you can feel when certain things happen in the game, whether you're fighting somebody or whatever. They do a very good job of that. So that's why it is the benefit of playing it on PS5. But at the end of the day, my hope is that in the future, Santa Monica Studio will consider because I will say this. I'm pretty sure there's going to be another God of War. I hope that game is PS5 only, and of course PC a year later. But I'm not expecting them to release that on PS4. And again, I'll go to Insomniac because they're the perfect example of this. They, of course, released Ratchet and Clank last year. That game is only on PS5. Only on PS5. Now, may it come to PC? I'm pretty sure it will come to PC at some point if it hasn't already, because that's one game I haven't heard anything about it coming to PC. But Insomniac was very clear, and they said Spider-Man 2, which is the next big Sony exclusive coming out next year, that's only going to be on PS5. So I hope they do not backtrack and decide to put it on PS4 as well, because they really are the only studio, outside for a few others, that are releasing stuff specifically for PS5. We can also mention Returnal, because that was only on PS5, and of course it will be on PC. But yeah, overall, I didn't notice any other issues with the game. It didn't hold it back that it's on PS4, but you definitely are curious after you play the game. You wonder, well, what would be different about this game if it was only on PS5? They could have definitely enhanced a lot of other things, and I'm very curious as to how they would have treated certain loading screens, whereas they wouldn't probably be there at all, how that would impact the overall gameplay experience. But overall, it doesn't suffer because it's on PS4. The game is fantastic on PS4 and PS5, at least from what I know so far about PS4. But PS5, it's solid. I didn't have any issues with it on the system.
Okay, so yeah, that's good to know. I did hear from someone who played it on PS4, and they seemed to be happy with how it turned out on there. So, that's great. But I do agree with you that if we're 2 years into the new console, the PS5, they do need to start giving us reasons to only have it or to upgrade to a PS5, I guess. Because if people were still, there's a lot of people out there who are just like, you know what, I'm going to stick with PS4. I'm not going to upgrade to the PS5. So you need to give those people a reason to actually want to, buy into the next generation. But, Sony has bigger problems also, because there's a supply problem. There's supply problems. There's issues with price, particularly over here, because they put up the price over here. So, it is what it is. But, that is good to hear that, at least because there is a significant fan base that's still on PS4. So at least they get access to this because it does seem like a great game. So let's get into some specifics then with God of War Ragnarok. So how much of the first game did you play, first of all, just quickly?
Yeah.
The last
game. I actually completed that game in full, like right before, literally. It's very funny, actually, like a day or two before I got the review code for this game is when I finished the other game. So that just happened to be good timing, because I did not know when they were going to send this game. I didn't know until, I want to say, sometime last month. But yeah, I was able to finish it.
Okay, so what are like the main differences or the main standout things with God of War Ragnarok compared to the first game? Like, are there any like major changes to the gameplay itself and how you interact with the characters and the realms and everything like that?
Oh yes.
What particularly stood out to you in terms of how it's different?
So the combat feels a lot more refined. I mean, I thought it was good in the last game, but they give you a little bit more options as to how you want to pursue a battle with the different weapons. Of course, you do have the Blades of Chaos still, as well as the Leviathan axe, but they also have this attack where you can jump on an enemy from above and just attack them as you hit the ground. They're right below you, which is a very effective way to do it. The leveling up system pretty much is the same. You have the armor that you can continue to get all the various armors as you play through the game. As far as the differences, again, one thing that they focused on with this particular game, the story does continue. So a lot of the events that happened in the previous game, well, there are consequences for those events in this game. And take, for example, we know what happened to Baldur at the end of the last game. And you know that Thor is not happy about that, for obvious reasons. That's his son. Freya is not happy about that as well. So going into this game at the very beginning of the game, and this is one thing again that I really love about the game, they do not waste time whatsoever with getting right into the meat of the story. Because at the very beginning of the game, you have a confrontation with Thor, an actual fight with Thor early into the game. And there's another fight that happens prior to that with a bear. You know, as you're looking for Atreus, there's this bear that you have to fight. It's revealed that that bear is actually Atreus. So a lot of this stuff you start to learn because, again, the story is evolving and going into what happens next as far as Atreus is concerned. And speaking to why this is important is because when it comes to the gameplay, how it is different is because you also are playing as Atreus in the game. So, you know, that's interesting because if you recall in the last game, you play as Kratos and you can tell Atreus, you know, by pressing the square button, tell Atreus to attack and shoot arrows at an enemy. Well, in this game, you actually get to play as Atreus for a change. And also I will add that because they treat Atreus as a companion when you play as Kratos. Well, there's another person that becomes a companion later in the game to Kratos. And you also can level up and control that person as well, just by telling them what to do. You can't actually play as them. So they do make some effort to change some stuff, but they really, for the most part, try to keep it the same as far as the gameplay is concerned, because they know how successful God of War 2018 was. So they don't want to jeopardize that with the sequel. And again, they go the route of continuing the story as well. And by continuing that story, that means you have to focus more so on other side characters. You know, Kratos is still there. But for me, like I said in my review, this game is focused a lot more on the side characters. And for those that get deeper into the story, because I know some people have already started playing this game, you'll see what I mean when I say that, because you find out more about these characters. You understand every single character is dealing with the weight of war that they have to face, because this is about Ragnarok. And there's a lot of pressure on a lot of different people as to how they are going to, whether or not they're going to attack, whether they're going to stand by and let stuff happen. So they really put a huge emphasis on that in this game, and you feel it. And every fight that you have is epic, especially against some of these bosses. So a lot of that stuff is still there with the sequel. And that's why I say, I'll also add the last point is it definitely can be challenging as you get deeper into the game. And when you start out the game, it feels like it's, you know, this is the same God of War type of experience. But when you get to some of these boss fights in the later parts of the game, oh, you 100% will be challenged. So for those thinking that they can play on the hardest difficulty setting, they probably will eventually beat it, but they're going to die many times before they actually finish that game. That's a guarantee, especially when you get into the later boss fights, because you can have your companion do stuff for you to help out. But for the most part, you have to carry the weight of that battle because all the enemies are coming directly after you. They'll go after your companion, but they come after you especially. So you got to be prepared for that for sure.
Okay, that sounds pretty intense, but that's what I expect from a God of War game. So just to kind of hone in on something you said about, you know, so it seems like in this game they pay close attention to some of the other side characters, you know, like Freya and you know, some of the other characters that we met in the previous game. So you know, I wanted to ask, like, for there are people out there who are Kratos loyalists, you know, and fanatics. So I want to ask you, like, do you think it might actually bother some people the fact that there is a lot of attention paid to other characters aside from just Kratos? Like, do you think it's enough to where it's gonna agitate some people?
Yes, I do think some people might be agitated, and let me explain why that is. If there are certain characters that you did not like in the first game, for example, Atreus. Atreus is the rebellious teenager that doesn't want to listen to his dad, so on and so forth. So if you are a parent and you happen to have a son or a daughter who is like this, then and you play this game, you will be annoyed about that. However, I will say that what the game does a very good job of doing is that as you play the game, it allows you to see both perspectives, both Atreus' perspective of what's happening and Kratos' perspective of what's happening. So they do a very good job of that. And the thing is that there are a lot of people like Kratos actually does not want to go to war. He does everything in his power to prevent going to war. But there are certain things that happen that it has to be a war. It just forces war to happen. But Atreus, on the other hand, and we can mention this because this is already in the trailers. You know that in the very beginning of the game, he wants to go out and look for Tyr, okay, because he feels that Tyr is the answer to him being ready to go up against Odin in a war. So Atreus really feels as though war is inevitable, and as a result of that, they have to just go into it and fight. Obviously, the reason why he is hesitant and why Kratos is hesitant to a degree is because we know what the fate is that was predicted for Kratos, that he will eventually, die. That's what they said pretty much in the last game. That his fate is that he's not going to make it out alive. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say what happens because some people may not have finished the game quite yet. But I will say this: if you do want me to have a much more spoiler, in-depth discussion, then we can do that in the future. You just need to leave a comment and let us know if you want that to happen. But what I will say is this: is that the way the game plays out, yes, Kratos is still a part of the game. He's an important part of the game. He still has the funny one-liners, the grumpy old man who will say something and you'll laugh. They still have that type of stuff in the game. But for me personally, it feels as though this game is more so about Atreus. It really is about both the father and son and their fates in this entire battle. But it's about Atreus because Atreus comes into contact with other characters, and then those other characters, you learn more about their story as well. Like in the image you have here, I believe I want to pronounce her name correctly. It's Agrabara, I believe is how you pronounce her name. You get more details about her backstory and about her parents. Thor, you get more about what he's dealing with, the fact that what happened in the last game and how it has impacted him mentally and physically. You get more details on that. Freya, obviously the same thing because she lost her son in the previous game, so you get more of her state of mind. And then again, you see how all of the realms are impacted by this major Ragnarok event that's going to happen. So they did a very good job of letting you know how serious the stakes are as far as the storytelling is concerned. That's why I think some people will forgive the fact that it doesn't feel as though it's heavily focused on Kratos. But again, I'm just curious to see what the general consensus will be, after a couple of days and going into next week, because so far it sounds to me, it looks like a lot of people are loving the game. The reactions have been excellent. So I want to see if that continues and what their general thoughts are going to be once they finish the game.
Okay, excellent. Because I know that, and with when the previous game came out, one of the biggest points that people loved about that game is just its portrayal of fatherhood and how it built on that, father and son dynamic and everything, and Kratos being the protector, of Atreus and things of that nature. And then it was a very touching story of them wanting to spread the ashes of his mother, down the mountains and stuff. I guess what I would like to know, story wise, and like you said, we might do a deeper dive where we talk spoilers fully and everything. We're just going to touch on some things that are already well known about the game at the moment. But just from what you can say, does it feel like this builds even more on that whole father and son dynamic, or does it feel very much like this is building up Atreus more to kind of be his own person, outside of Kratos? What do you think about that?
I would say it does both. It definitely continues to build on the father and son dynamic because, again, anytime Kratos' mindset is he is the protector of his son. If he feels his son is in danger, he has to do anything he can to make sure he's not in danger. But again, this also, it does a very good job of communicating trust between a father and son, because they make mistakes throughout the campaign. They both make mistakes. And again, they have to learn to accept each other as father and son, acknowledge when there's a mistake, but then also have the right mindset to trust the other to make the right decisions and to go forth and do what they have to do collectively. So it definitely builds on the dynamic of how it feels to be a father. I mean, I'm not a father. Maybe one day I will be a father, but I can say someone who is a father and you have a kid, you will feel a deep connection to this game, because I'm pretty sure that there are times when, especially if you have an older son or daughter, where they might annoy you or they might get on your nerve. And what I feel is missing in the world today is that you have these different generations, but a lot of the generations don't understand each other. They don't appreciate certain things that maybe their parents grew up in a certain times. They don't really appreciate each other and understand, and they lack communication. And you see in this game that is apparent, but they have communications. So it really teaches you how to communicate with your kid and understand things from their perspective, but for them to also respect you and understand your perspective as well. Those values are definitely instilled in the game. And then the other point that you mentioned about, does it build up Atreus? Yes, it does, because you get a chance to play as Atreus. So you have an understanding of how he views this whole situation with Ragnarok, what he is trying to do to play his role in all of this, but also understanding that he definitely, like I said before, for the most part, Kratos wants to make sure his son is safe. And Atreus wants the exact same thing for his father. He wants his father to be safe. This is why he avoids certain things, because he doesn't want his father to die. But again, as the storyline progresses, they understand that they all have to have their own paths. But as long as they trust each other to make the right decisions, then that's all that matters. He understands that his son is going to do what he wants to do, and his son understands that Kratos is going to do whatever he wants to do, but they have to be on the same page. And again, that starts with the communication between both characters. So again, it teaches a lot of the values that I think a lot of people lack today, because I know that a lot of parents and their kids, they don't really talk much about important things that they should be talking about. And that is why I say, for me, it is very emotional, and it makes a lot of sense why it would be people will be impacted so heavily. But that's one of the strengths of the game, for sure. 100%.
Okay, thanks for breaking that down. It definitely sounds like, it's very important and very something that's very much needed, because I feel like with a lot of media out there, we don't really get that bond. We don't get to explore that bond in its full nature, and it's a very important bond. So I'm glad that we're getting games like this. And I know that this was very much inspired by people's real life experiences, with parenthood. So that's also excellent. So another question I had in particular was one of the things that I in the first game I remember was you had because the game mechanics are very addictive for people who like combat and stuff. They are very, like, it's very fun. A lot of the battles are very intense, and you have to have like great timing. It's a game that you really have to kind of like master, in some sense. And then for the people who take that seriously, they did have things like the Valkyries, where it took a lot of skill to kind of take down these side bosses and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask you, is there anything equal to that in this version of the game? Anything like the Valkyries, where there's these side boss battles and stuff that you can explore, if you want to.
Hmm. That's a very good question. Yes, there are a ton of challenges. The Valkyries in particular, as you get later into the game, there is a particular battle you have to have with two Valkyries at the same time. And that battle was pretty intense. And some of this stuff, it's not like you just like when you look into a boss battle in this game, it's like you see the boss has a certain certain pattern as far as how they attack. Some of that stuff is still in there, but there are some boss battles where there's a pattern that they have of attacking, and you still need to be very careful because they may switch up a certain move that they do when they're attacking you. And then in that case, that's why you said you have to evolve and learn from your mistakes. The bosses, they do have some of these boss battles where the bosses are huge in size and scale, like they have had in the older God of War games. And again, like, your companion at the time can give you tips about if the enemy has a weak area, you need to shoot that weak area and do certain things. And then, like, there's one boss battle in particular that I don't want to spoil, but it has to do with this huge creature that you're facing. And this is a battle where you fight the creature and you get to a certain point, but then you have to you'll see a button prompt where you'll have to do something to try to keep the creature contained for a minute and then start attacking them again. That happens often in the game. And then, of course, there is this one particular battle you do have with the final boss. Now, I'm not going to say who that is, but I think you can figure it out. I mentioned this character already. That final boss battle was absolutely insane because it's a lot of things you got to do to try to control this character. And it's not necessarily easy. You do have the companion assistance, like I mentioned earlier, but it's that battle was pretty intense. And I know I died a couple of times in that battle. I would be surprised if there's anybody that's able to get through that battle and not die one time because it's pretty intense. But yeah, for the most part, you do still have the prompts because you have your shield. When an enemy attacks and it's in yellow, normally you can block those attacks with your shield. But if they are attacking and the attack is in red, then you cannot block those attacks whatsoever. So you need to get out the way and evade them if possible. But for the most part, yes, it is definitely still challenging. More so as you get deeper into, the game. One thing I will say real quickly, because I think I could say this. I mean, if anyone has played the first few minutes of the first hour or 2 hours of the game, when you have the battle with Thor, I just want to say that was a fantastic battle to start the game, because at one point in the battle, Thor takes the hammer and pretty much knocks you down, and it makes it look like the game is over, like you died, and but then he says, "Oh, wait a second, no, I'll let you know when we're done," and then he revives you, and then the battle continues. That was awesome, a very awesome battle. And again, it's like you fight him in waves. You fight him, and then there's like a animation cutscene takes place of more battling between them, more dialogue. Then the battle continues again, and his health bar keeps going back up to where it was at before. So stuff like that is great, and it does happen later in the game with certain other characters. But for the most part, the game is definitely challenging. And the last point that I will mention, some of the side content that they have, like, I guess the way I can describe it, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, they had this thing in the game where you can go against people could tell me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. There were these Drugna bosses where it's like the warriors that they know that they're going to die, but they want to have a fight to the death. They have something like this in this game where you're using this key to unlock these graves, and it's of these warriors of the past that you have to fight. Those were pretty challenging because it's like a lot of dodging and jumping around. And sometimes when you're fighting the enemy, like if you have your companion shooting the arrows, they don't really have a huge impact on the damage of the actual enemy. So you have to be the one to go in there and fight. But again, those battles will take a while to finish. I'm actually still playing through some of the side content now, but those take a little bit of time to get through because it's not like you can just walk into the fight and immediately beat the bad guy. It takes a while. Obviously, if you level up your character, that helps a little bit. But when you have to get in close on an enemy to get the most damage, it takes a while, and you have to keep evading and stuff like that. So yes, the challenge is still there in terms of you trying to do all these other things when it comes to the boss battles, for sure.
Oh, that's good to know. You're making me actually want to play it now, like, because it seems interesting. Like, seems like very intense, and I definitely want to experience that Thor fight because I know that's going to be epic. Epic
Yeah.
fight, an epic battle. Um, so the last kind of question I had, and then I'm gonna let you say anything you want to say. But so with the companions, and the way you've described them, were there any times where like because I know in other games I play and they have companion systems and stuff. Sometimes it's very annoying, like to have a companion in a game, especially if the AI is not up to par. So was there any times like that in this game where like, the companion system was a little off or it didn't really work or, any
That's a very good question. Well, here's the thing. More so, I see when you get into those boss battles, that is where the companion, they're obviously there to assist with the attacks, but their attacks may not be quite as effective as your own attacks. Like they are there to provide and assist wherever they can, whether it's shooting arrows or maybe if you hold down the attack button, then their special attack. But after you have leveled up the character, they may do like a special attack. But really, at the end of the day, when it comes to the fighting, you really are on your own. Like I said, they'll assist and they'll help in a lot of areas. But again, that also depends on what difficulty you're playing the game on. Because if you're playing on the standard difficulty level, you may get their assistance in some instances a lot often when it comes to facing the side enemies. But when it comes to facing the bosses specifically, it's like they're not really as effective. They are effective, but not as effective as you yourself are based on how you attack. What I will say though is they are very helpful when it comes to doing the puzzles because the puzzle aspect again, and that's again like you made the comment earlier. When you're playing through a game that no one really has access to yet, you can't go online and look at a certain puzzle as to how to solve something. What I will say is that when I was playing through this game, I was able to solve a lot of the puzzles. There are some that I wasn't quite able to solve because they may require because it also requires using your weapons as well. Because for example, the Leviathan axe, you have the ability to freeze, and you turn it, you freeze it, and you throw it at enemies and stuff like that. You have to use that weapon often with some of these puzzles to freeze an object so that you can gain access to another area. So in those instances, I was able to figure that stuff out. But the companion will give you a clue and say, "Hey, there's something over there you should look at, or maybe we can use your weapon to freeze this object." That stuff is very helpful for sure. So I give them credit for that. But the companion is great. But like I said, when it comes to those battles when you have to go against a boss, they're not going to be as effective as you being the one to actually do all the attacks on the actual boss. I mean, it could be a situation where you've done a lot of damage to the boss and then you have them shoot an arrow and then the boss dies. That can happen. But again, for the most part, you're going to have to be the one to carry the load as far as taking out the enemies, especially the bosses, to make sure that they actually are, killed off to an extent.
Okay, that sounds good then. So before we end off then, was there anything else like in particular that you want to, bring up or say about the game? Or, if you have like any particular critique about the game that we haven't mentioned or anything, anything additional that you want to say?
Sure. So, well, I honestly don't have any real critiques. As far as the story is very well done. The acting it's extremely well done. One thing I do want to say, however, about this game, because I know this game will be in the Game of the Year discussions. I will say this: I did not play Elden Ring, so I don't have an opinion on Elden Ring. But I will say this is a game that 100% needs to be in that discussion. I know people will say it possibly shouldn't be because God of War in 2018, I guess, won a lot of Game of the Year awards. And there's some people may say, well, it doesn't feel quite as different as the previous game. I would say I disagree with those people because, again, the stuff that you're doing as Atreus in the game, that is different. And it makes sense for them to go in that direction because they have to continue telling the story that they've already started. So I think it has enough in it that it should be in that discussion for Game of the Year. We'll see if that happens. But the point that I want to mention is this, and I don't want to make this I don't want to make this sound as though this is like a fanboy statement, because I'm not really a fanboy. I have Xbox, I have PC, and I have a PlayStation. So, but I will say this. From the moment I started playing this game, you know, I know that there have been, like I said earlier in this podcast, a lot of people have criticized why the developers were not really giving us a release date. They took so long to talk about the game. And I understand that because, again, I'm not a developer, but I understand you don't announce certain things until the game is far along and you feel as though you have a confirmed time to announce a release date, so on and so forth. But one thing I want to say is this. I have to say, from the minute I started playing this game, I didn't care that it was on PS4. I didn't really care about it being a cross-gen title. It's because the quality of the game itself was so good. The quality of the game and the quality of the experience as a first-party title, this lets you know. And again, it is a PlayStation console exclusive. It still is coming to PC in the future, which we know. But from the minute I started playing that, I felt like this is what I am expecting when I play a first-party exclusive title from a studio. And I say that because I feel as though, as someone who is, and I don't have a problem admitting this, I've always been a huge supporter of Xbox and PlayStation. But growing up as a kid, I was able to get all the consoles. But Xbox is something that I gravitate towards because I like Xbox. I like the ecosystem and all that other stuff. But I want to say that the last couple of years, Xbox has not really had any quality exclusives on that console. They've had games that were pretty good, like so on and so forth. Obviously, Forza Motorsport is a fantastic game, but Halo Infinite, the way they have treated that game has not been good. You know, I mean, obviously, I know that they have admitted themselves that they feel as though they haven't done a good job with supporting the game. They're 100% right. But what I'm saying is that I hope that this game and a lot of the other Sony games, because I thought Miles Morales was a great game. I thought for Horizon Forbidden West was also a great game. But what I'm hoping is that Microsoft, they're going to see this game and they're going to know when we do bring out our exclusive first-party titles, it needs to be at a certain level of quality for the game. It cannot be a half-assed game because, again, it speaks volumes when the game is of quality. This is why it's getting recognized by everybody and why they are enjoying it so much. And it justifies the amount of time you're putting into the experience. Because, again, I know that next year is a very important year for Xbox. Of course, those Bethesda games that they have acquired, we know Starfield and Redfall are coming out next year. So obviously people have expectations for those games. But what I'm saying specifically, because in my mind, those were acquisitions by Microsoft. Those are not first-party Microsoft Studios games. I want to see Xbox have a game of this same quality coming out of their first-party studios. So Playground, they've done a fantastic job with the Forza series up until this point. They're working on Fable now. I have high expectations for that. But all I'm saying is that, yes, I hope that by Microsoft seeing, and then I did see earlier today, or rather yesterday, Phil Spencer sent out a tweet congratulating the team for releasing God of War, and he said he's going to check it out. So I really do hope that they're not just saying this stuff out there in the public. I want them to actually play these games, see why people are so immersed in the experience, and use this as a way to improve their own games. Because as an Xbox owner, I own an Xbox Series X. Game Pass is fantastic, but where the hell are the first-party games? We've been waiting for 2 years for quality first-party titles. And I feel as though, yes, you give the developers time to make great games, but I'm expecting some fantastic games in the next year and onward from Microsoft, because we waited far too long for that to happen. So I just wanted to make a comment about that. Again, I have a PS5, I have an Xbox Series X, and a PC, so I'm not really saying anything as a fanboy. I'm just saying, as someone that loves gaming, I want to see Microsoft actually have quality games out here as well. because I think their fans deserve that, especially if they've spent all this money on a console. But that's just my opinion.
Oh yeah, the people want to hear that opinion, and we might have to do some type of content where we talk about some of this other stuff, particularly the Activision thing that's going on right now, the
Oh
Activision
yeah.
Blizzard,
Mhm.
and some of the other I guess console war topics out there. We'll have to we'll definitely have to have a conversation about that, on one of our shows. So we'll see. But yeah, excellent discussion about God of War Ragnarok. I want to hear more from the people also who are now playing the game. But yeah, I definitely wanted to make sure that we had something, where we were talking about it on YouTube and on the podcast feed and everything like that. Don't forget to check out the review on thecoalition.com. It's over there right now, so go check out Richard's review, go read that, because there is a lot of in-depth stuff on there. But yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. We are going to, be trying to do more gaming related things now, to feed that audience. I know there's a lot of people out there who know us for being gamers and being, the go-to source for gaming content. So yeah, we are going to make sure we do that and we cover that base. But thank you for joining me on this edition of Swift Report, Richard.
Thank you for having
And
me.
yep, I will have you back again to talk about some more stuff. That's for sure. So, but yeah, you have a good evening, and take care to all the people listening out there. And we'll see you again soon.
Yes. Peace.
Peace.